Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo and Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube. Another fun episode here, Sam. We get to, in the middle of the offseason, listicle season, rank the best units around the NFL. Kind of kept this open-ended. It could be defensive lines, could be pass catchers, could be whatever you wanted to come up with. I went with an ordered list, which is rare for me. I usually like to not put my name to hard numbers like that.
Yeah.
And you didn't. You just kind of mishmashed it.
I just came up with, 10 of the best units in the NFL. You went in order. The 10 best in order.
So because of that, we're going to unveil my order. We'll respond accordingly, see where you agreed, at least have that in your top 10, and then go with some honorable mentions, which essentially will be the ones that you had on your list that I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Sound good?
Yep.
And then I might unveil some modeling that I've done that might push a few other surprise units to the top. Ones that I didn't feel good enough about where maybe the data was pointing it, but it's like watch list. Keep an eye on these things.
Model related units.
Maybe. I need something to pick games better. So I'm gonna solve picking against the spread. I'm the first one to try to tackle this in history. But I'm just going to try to solve that heading into the season over the next couple weeks here.
You might be the first person to look at it with an aim of just beating your child.
Try.
I think a lot of other people have looked at it, but
and by beating, you mean defeating him in a game of pick'em.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think a lot of people have looked at, solving gambling with a view to making money or, those types of motivations. You might be the first person to look at it seriously to just beat your child at picking against the spread over the course of a season.
It's like your brother-in-law using AI just to win a board game.
Of Clue.
I might need to use AI to beat Harry.
Maybe Claude can fix it.
All right. Let's get into this. This was fun. Best units around the NFL. Those who have, I'm going to start at the top. And me, numbered list. It's like, what's the difference between 2 and 4 and 4 and 7? It's minimal, but you guys can get angry either way. Best unit in the NFL. I'm going Ravens secondary. And yes, year 13 of me overrating the veteran injured player. In this case, it's Jair Alexander. But I think the Ravens would have been up here anyway. By the way, it's funny for someone that cares about, the whole and everything and in the totality of the group, how much like a Frank Ragnow retirement or a Jair Alexander signing changes things in my brain. I might fall victim to overrating the individual player, but the Ragnow retirement really hurts the Lions O-line because they go from one question mark to two.
Yeah.
In the Jair signing, again, I'm viewing it as a high upside play here, but it's the rest of what they have with Kyle Hamilton, adding Malachi Starks, having Marlon Humphrey, having Nate Wiggins. I just love the depth and versatility of this Ravens secondary.
Yeah, I think it certainly has the potential to be one of the best units in the NFL. The versatility as well that they have is crazy. I mean, we talked about it before. The ability they have to move around players to accommodate injuries, right? And those things happen all the time. But Marlon Humphrey and Kyle Hamilton, the ability that both those guys have to effectively play the slot, but also play a different position within the secondary is huge because it means whatever happens, they've got somebody that they know can play within nickel and dime sub-package defense without diminishing the rest of the defense. And there's not that many teams where that's true. Like the Ravens can lose an outside corner, they can lose a safety, and they can lose a slot corner. Any of which is fine because the other guy can fill that role. That's not true maybe for any other team in the NFL. Like, yeah, if one guy went down, you could maybe make an accommodation, but like the Ravens can lose any of those positions and immediately have an answer to it within the same defense.
The other thing when I'm looking at these, there's a guy like TJ Tampa who I thought when he came out 2 years ago, cornerback out of Iowa State, could have gone as high as the second round. They got him in the fourth. There's depth there with a Tampa who I still think has some upside. There's Chidobe Awuzie, who has not been great in recent years, but is still a good buy low. And so there's a process element to this where I think the Ravens have attacked this extremely well. Coming into the offseason, I would argue a couple weeks ago I said CB2 was their weakness. In reality, it's one of the 3 starters, right? So it's not that Marlon Humphrey or Nate Wiggins as a weakness. It was finding that third starter. And they essentially attacked that with a returning TJ Tampa, a buy low on Chidobe Awuzie, and a buy low on Jair Alexander. So process-wise, like one of those three guys should hit with, again, Humphrey's inside-outside ability, Wiggins on the outside, and then the two safeties, Hamilton and Starks.
Yeah, I mean, the pieces are there for this to be spectacular. The question marks are, Jair Alexander's been banged up, has played like 50% of the snaps in the last couple of years. Chidobe Awuzie has been declining in the last couple of years. He's gone from being a good, capable starter to being an average starter to being a below average starter, basically sequentially in the last few years. If that continues, he might be a problem going forward, but he's, I think, capable of bouncing back, and that might just be variance that happens to be, stepping down. And then Malachi Starks, the rookie, who we don't know if he's going to be good yet. Everyone loved Malachi Starks generally, but rookie stepping in immediately, it's always a question mark, right? So the pieces are there, but we don't know how it's going to go.
By the way, this always looks better on paper in my mind than maybe how it plays out. But if you wanted to play matchups, remember around draft time, how many times I made the point that I was wondering if Malachi Starks, if teams might see him as a corner. Recently, during summer scouting, I was watching Clemson quarterback Cade Klubnik and reminded of the great interception that Malachi Starks had against him in week 1 last year. Man coverage, where he goes up, attacks the ball in the air, high points it. I mean, Malachi Starks has some man coverage chops. We know Kyle Hamilton can do everything. And as we mentioned, Humphrey is an inside-outside threat. I don't think there's a team in the NFL where if they really wanted to play one-on-one matchup, man-to-man basketball-style defense, have the different body types and pieces to be able to do that. It doesn't happen around the NFL all that often, but the Ravens have that from a game plan specific standpoint. If they want to go week to week and play to the man coverage strength of their safeties, who also have to play free safety and strike, they have to play normal safety. But if they want to, man up with those guys, the versatility that they have with this group is really incredible. So I like the depth. I like the way they bought low on some pieces, but also the upside of some of the younger players and the stardom of Kyle Hamilton. So it's the best unit in the NFL, Ravens secondary.
The other thing about them is they're a draft prior's crush dream because, like you said, a load of people love TJ Tampa. This year, a load of people love Robert Longerbeam. Bilal Kone was one of my favorite sleepers in this draft. So they've got a whole bunch of these lower round, late draft type guys that a bunch of draftniks loved. So you can talk yourself into the Ravens, even outside of the guys they have at the top that are just at the bottom end of the depth chart.
All right, so they're number 1 for me. I'm going to go number 2, staying in the same division, staying on the defensive side of the ball. I'm going Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm calling it their defensive line, but we know it's the old school Steelers 3-4. It's their defensive linemen plus their outside linebackers. I didn't want to just say pass rushers because I think they could play the run as well. But the depth that they have up and down their line, of course, led by TJ Watt. But even down the stretch last year, I was just sorting through some stuff on PFF recently. If you just look at the highest graded pass rushers in the second half of last season, it's not even TJ Watt. In the NFL, Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig are in the top 6. That's the 2 and 3 edge rushers behind TJ Watt, and they drafted Jack Sawyer, and they drafted Derek Harmon in the first round, and they still have Cam Hayward playing at a high level. They have Keanu Benton. This might be the very best front 7 before you even get to the inside linebackers, but certainly the best group of pass rushers and what we'll call a defensive line in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree. I had the Steelers defensive line. I called it the same thing, the D line. That it could be a nasty unit. I mean, Cameron Hayward is still playing his best football deep into his career. TJ Watt is a superstar. Alex Highsmith, I think, has become a superstar. He just gets overshadowed because TJ Watt is on the other side. Nick Herbig is one of the best situational pass rushers in the NFL at this point as a guy off the bench in rotation. Keanu Benton is a good player on the defensive line. And then Derek Harmon comes in as, their sort of big splash play early in the draft. And that's before you even get to the sort of complete throwaway additions of guys like Yaya Black, Jack Sawyer. Like, okay, Jack Sawyer is a marginal to bad NFL athlete, but was an exceptionally productive and good college player. If he's anything at the NFL level, it's a complete and total bonus and just somebody that they have, adding insane depth. So the sort of starting, 4 or 5, however many guys you want to go, and then the first guy off the bench is really good. And there's a whole layer of players that are just bonus picks if they end up doing anything as well. It could be absurdly good. And I think the floor for it is like one of the best defensive lines in the NFL.
Yeah, you could argue. I mean, I don't think anybody would say that, there's other better, I think, pairs of edge rushers than TJ Watt and, say, Alex Highsmith. But as far as the top 3 goes, when you add Herbig in there, I'd say that's probably the best. Top 4, when you add Sawyer in there, I'd say that's the best. And then Derek Harmon being added, a guy, I think he's a better pass rusher than run defender, similar to Keanu Benton. And then Cameron Hayward, still very productive. That trio, man, they can all get after the quarterback. So you're talking about on early downs, you'll have 5 legitimate threats to get after the quarterback with your 3 down linemen, your 2 outside backers in that system. On passing downs, you're going to have 4 legitimate threats with your 4-man rush. And if you did want to add, a Herbig and move him around or whatever it might be, you've got mismatch potential. So absolutely love this unit. I do think they're better rushing the passer than they are stopping the run. But as a total group, similar to the Ravens, I think the high-end players are elite with a TJ Watt or a Cameron Hayward, but also the depth and everything that they've added. Just an outstanding job by the Steelers the last couple of years to build this defensive front.
Yeah, and in an ideal world, you'd want the entire line to be elite at both run defense and pass rush. But if I have to weight it in one direction, it's weighted in the right direction. Like I want the destructive pass rush more than I want the brick wall of a run defense unit.
And look, we're a couple weeks away. We're going to get back into the studio and really kick off our season preview series and just get ready for 2025. I think the Steelers come into this year as one of the biggest wild cards, in part because you don't know what you're going to get from Aaron Rodgers. The idea that, okay, this might be his last season. He's hinting at that. A lot of superstars tend to turn it on at various points when they want to, right? Rodgers MVP season after they drafted Jordan Love, or like Ray Lewis down the stretch going to win a Super Bowl. That's going to be a big wild card, but I think the Steelers are set up to have one of the best defenses in the NFL, in part, because of the way they built this with youth and, of course, the veterans like a TJ Watt and Cameron Hayward. So they're set up to either have one of the best defenses, and then it kind of comes down to the Aaron Rodgers wild card, but I think the defense could really pave the way for this team.
Yeah, I do feel like people are sleeping on this defense a little bit. Okay, there are some weaknesses in the starting 11 or, in the group as a whole, but the defensive line that we're talking about, like that has the capacity to be so good that it, papers over some of the cracks or hides some of the relative weaknesses. And like this, I do think that like league leading destructive, terrifying defense is within the range of outcomes of this group. And that changes everything about, their prospects as a team overall, roster wise, top to bottom. Like the Steelers are not as good as the Ravens. They might not be as good as, the Bengals or some of the other contenders in the AFC. But like if that defense plays at that kind of level, that kind of output and production, it changes what they're capable of doing.
All right. I feel pretty good about those top 2. I think the Ravens secondary, Steelers, call it defensive line. I don't know if this is really, I put this team at number 3 or this group at number 3. It might be a little high, but Bucs wide receivers. Just wanted to highlight the high end and the depth of this unit as well. Adding first rounder Emeka Egbuka. You know me, I have a soft spot for non-need picks in the draft, particularly at wide receiver. And, that's when you draft Randy Moss when you already have a great 1-2. That's when you draft CeeDee Lamb when you already have one of the best 1-2 punches in the NFL like the Cowboys did. That's what the Bucs did. Now, I know there's an injury concern with Chris Godwin, but I'd say early in the year that might affect him. But we're talking about Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Emeka Egbuka. They still have Jalen McMillan, last year's third rounder, who had a lot of success and would be a pretty good number 3 in his own right. You still have Trey Palmer and his speed, but also Tez Johnson. Like someone's not making the team here or not getting time, but Tez Johnson, I can't forget Tez Johnson. I know he was just like a late add-on here, but he's too good of a football player, I think, to not make an impact. But the 1-2 punch of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and then adding Emeka Egbuka to this group, love this Bucs wide receiver core.
Yeah, this is the first one that didn't make my list at all. I think I get it. I think they're really strong. There's just more question marks, more unknowns. Like the range, you've got Chris Godwin, who's really good, but is also coming off another significant knee injury at his age. It's not a slam dunk that he's going to come back and be the player he was before that. Mike Evans has been the best receiver, on this team since he came into the league. Is not getting younger, right? He's only kind of aging at that point. I wonder at some point if that starts to take away from what he's able to do. McMillan, I think, is solid. Ibuka, their first round pick, I wonder if he's only solid, or if he can be more than that. Trey Palmer, he has speed, but does he have anything else? And then Tez Johnson, I agree with you. I think there's a very good chance that he's a dynamic impact, really good playmaker. The league didn't agree, though. Like, the league let him slide to where they let him slide. And that says 32 NFL teams believe there's a greater chance than not that actually his size is prohibitive. The fact that he didn't run, a 4.3 40, all these things effectively add up to say there's more of a chance that he's not that guy that he is. So, it's how you want to view it. I think you can definitely paint the picture of Ibuka's fantastic. Chris Godwin comes back 100%. Tez Johnson's dynamic the way he was at Oregon, and all these things add up, and boom. Maybe it doesn't, though.
I mean, Tez is just the cherry on top here. He's certainly not the reason that I'm picking them. He goes pick 237 in the 7th round. But the rule here, Sam. There was minicamp hype around Tez Johnson, and if he's a player that I like, you buy into the hype in minicamp.
Yeah.
If it's a player you don't like, it's just minicamp. We haven't put the pads on yet. But this is, hey, if he was hyped up in minicamp, the dude's going for 100 catches this year.
Tez Johnson feels to me like there's a couple of these players every year where everyone loves them as a player. Everyone also knows they're not going to go high in the draft for whatever reason. And immediately it's just clear that like everyone was right? Like I can't think of a good example of this, but like every year there's a couple of these players where it's like everybody has good things to say about them, but they also know they're going to go in day 3 sometime, and then immediately they walk onto the field and they're good, right? And it's like, why did we overthink this? Why did we allow whatever it is, the fatal flaw of him as a prospect, to drag him down to day 3 when it was clear he was going to be good? I kind of feel that way about Tez Johnson. Yes, he's tiny. Yes, he didn't run a 4.3, but he also spent an entire week at the Senior Bowl just barbecuing people with his quickness and like that. Right. And let alone what he did at Oregon in college where he was uncoverable. I mean, that's probably still going to play.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that I think hinders him is opportunity. I mean, there's a pretty clear top 4, and then Trey Palmer has speed that no one else on this team has. So if you really want to have Trey Palmer, he still has the inconsistent hands, but if you still want to have his 4.3 speed and taking the top off the defense, that's a specific role that no one else can fill. So it's just opportunity depending on how slow they are with Chris Godwin getting into the mix. I'm assuming Ibuka. I mean, he's another big one for me. The more I watched him, the more I liked him and think this guy's just going to produce at the next level. And so I think he's going to fill in admirably for Godwin as Godwin gets ramped up. And then Mike Evans is just a fascinating discussion here, Sam. I feel like he's both over and underrated all at the same time. Overrated because of the consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. It's only him and Jerry Rice on this list, and you know how that just creates this false picture, like, oh, he's like Jerry. He's nothing like Jerry Rice. I don't even know if Evans has been a top 10. How many years has Evans been a top 10 receiver in the NFL? If you were actually ranking them. But he's been on the fringe. Has he been close to the top 5? I don't think so. But I also believe he has the opportunity to turn it on when he wants to. Him and Baker both have that, like, hey, chips are down, let's go play. Let's go take over a game. I think they both have that in them, and they both play off each other really well. So Mike Evans has that high end combined with some of the consistency and then all the depth that the Bucs have. I just love this receiving core right now.
He's also such a big play threat. I mean, he's not the same as Trey Palmer in terms of take the top off of defense speed, but he does win in those ways a lot as well. Like, he's got a career yards per reception number over 15. He's got 100+ touchdowns at this point as well, which honestly is maybe more significant than the consecutive 1,000-yard streak, etc. It's like he will remain a deep threat, a big play threat within this offense, even if he loses a step, because like a lot of his plays, he's not winning by just burning a guy deep down the field. He's winning by being big and strong and fast. And that isn't going to go anywhere, I don't think, even when he starts to slow down.
All right, so that was the first one you didn't have on your list of 10. Next one I'm going to go with is the Vikings defensive line. Again, I think these next few are kind of interchangeable for me, but the Vikings defensive line with basically what they've done these last two off seasons. I think when you look at what Kwesi's done in Minnesota, getting out from the Kirk Cousins contract, opting into a rookie contract quarterback, and then how do you attack the team building strategy from there? And it has been, let's spend on the defensive line. Last year was all about the edge rushers. Jonathan Grenard comes in. Andrew Van Ginkel comes in. Both guys make a massive impact, and they drafted Dallas Turner. And then this year they bring in Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. So I think they said, look, we were kind of weak at defensive tackle last year. Let's go get Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. Could be another example of me living in 2-3 years ago. But I think if one of those guys hits, they're still worthy of being on this list. Van Ginkel and Grenard, one of the best 1-2 punches on the edge. Allen and Hargrave, similar to what we said with the Steelers, better pass rushers than run defenders, but they're very disruptive. My guy Jalen Redmond still on the roster. I love him. One of the more underrated players in the league. Harrison Phillips is solid at defensive tackle. And then if Dallas Turner is your third edge, a guy that, look, I was lower on him than others. I would have taken him below Jared Verse and Laiatu Latu a couple of years ago. But if he's your third edge rusher with his pass rush potential, mismatch capability there, I love the high end and the depth of this team as well, of this unit.
Yeah, so I had them, but I called it pass rush rather than defensive line because I'm not sure
That's fair.
Any of them defend the run particularly well. I don't think they're edge rushers. I think they're all better pass rushers than they are run defenders. I don't think any of those edge rushers are particularly good against the run. And then the two interior players that they signed, Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen, both those guys are more pass rush specialists than they are run defenders. Now, Hargrave, at least in his history, has shown the ability to defend the run, but not for a long time. So theoretically he can. I just don't know whether they want him doing that or whether he's decided himself to just ignore it in favor of pressure and, production against the pass. But I would wonder if any of that group defends the run particularly well. So I've termed it pass rush, but I do believe you're right that now as a collective, and you're right about the Allen and Hargrave thing as well. You got to go back a little while to find those guys really playing their best, but theoretically the talent is there. Plus, I would imagine you're going to get a boost now because of this defensive scheme, because of this Flores system, because of the amount of blitzing and the one-on-one opportunities they're all going to get. I think that will sort of turbocharge or catalyze the production of all of them. So Van Ginkel, Grenard, Jonathan Allen, Hargrave, Dallas Turner, if they throw him out there as well in year two, I think the capacity is there for this to be a really, really good pass rush.
And I feel like, Sam, every week we're going to be saying, what is Brian Flores going to do with his defense? Because you mentioned all the blitzing. 2 years ago, it felt like they needed a blitz because they didn't have pass rushers. They go into last offseason, sign the two free agents, Grenard and Van Ginkel, and draft Dallas Turner. In my head, it's like, all right, we want to have more four-man rushes. We want to play a little bit more conventional up front, trust the four-man rush. They didn't really do that. They didn't blitz as often. It was down a little bit, but not drastically. Are they trying to go more conventional now? Are they trying to trust that front four to get pressure a bit more? So whether Flores goes down that path or not, maybe week to week he might. We asked this a lot against the Lions, where the Lions always had answers against his pressure packages. Are they going to go more conventional, four-man rush here? They at least have on paper the horses to do that. So I love the top five potential pass rushers there. And you're probably right calling it pass rush more than D-line. But remember, the Vikings also stopped the run extremely well last year, in part because of extra bodies in the box, playing with 8 men. So the way these pieces are fitting, I think, is really well done as well. They said the collective run defense is fantastic. We can handle, say, lesser run defenders because we're a good team. We play good team run defense. You know what I mean? So the top 5 pass rushers really intriguing there. The 2 defensive tackles and the 3 edges, and then Jalen Redmond and Levi Drake Rodriguez, 2 of my, sleeper favorite backup defensive tackles around the league. So I love all that put together for Minnesota here.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a defense, the Vikings' run defense will still be good. Like I think as a collective, they will still defend the run well. But I wouldn't say it's a strength of the defensive line. As a collective, I think it's a schematic win how they defend the run last year, and I think how they'll do it again this year. But I think you're right. What this might be able to do is to give them the ability in a given game where an offense either has the answers to the blitz or is just presenting them something else that they don't want to be able to blitz, or they don't want to have to blitz every, as often as they normally do, to just back off. And instead of dropping everybody into coverage, just run a normal, 4-man rush or a simple zone blitz or, something relatively conventional rather than having to send the house every single time because you've got confidence in the front 4, right? That I think is a difference this year, at least on paper, relative to the last couple of seasons of this Flores defense.
And by the way, it's not like this has been Flores' MO his entire career. He came from the Belichick system, which is not blitz heavy. It is, trust the front and play a lot of man coverage on the back end. Like Flores has kind of created his own world here since coming over from Miami and Pittsburgh. It's been his own style with Minnesota. And yeah, I can't wait to see how this evolves. I think he does have the pieces to get after the quarterback, though, in different ways instead of the smoke and mirrors, as you've termed it. So they're number 4 on my list. You agreed with that pretty much. Vikings pass rush. Number 5, I'm going Bengals wide receivers. So I've got some wide receiver and pass catcher groups on here. Bengals wide receivers. I could easily put them above the Bucs, who I had higher. I think the Bucs have a little bit better depth, unless Sam, we're weeks away here. Training camp, couple weeks away here. It's going to start. The buzz is going to start. Jermaine Burton, he's got his head on straight. I mean, he's the biggest wild card year 2. Biggest wild card once again. But, of course, we've got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Not only are they great, but they're signed and locked up. So maybe the best 1-2 punch in the NFL. Josevich, Princeton, he did a really nice job last year and became a big red zone threat, became a nice number 3. And then you've got the wild card of Jermaine Burton, where if his head is on straight, the guy can still play if he runs the right routes and he shows up to practice. Jermaine Burton, breakout season, part 2. Never know.
He's cut his hair, so new Jermaine Burton, new haircut, new Jermaine Burton was the story during minicamp. So I mean, why wouldn't it work?
I need to find out if we have the same stylist, because we both live within 6 to 8 minutes of each other here. There's a good chance that we both. I wonder if he goes to parlor like I do. I wonder if Liz cuts his hair. Liz would tell me though.
Liz, gray taken out as well.
What do you mean? Please don't give away any secrets.
I'm not sure that's a secret.
Liz would tell me. Liz has all the dirt on the Bengals players. Every time I go in, she tells me who Joe Burrow's dating and what's happening in social media world with Bengals players. So she would let me know if Jermaine Burton was coming by for a haircut. But either way, calling the breakout part 2 here for Jermaine Burton. But even if he doesn't break out, Sam, I think they'll still be okay with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and then what Josevich added as wide receiver 3 last year.
Yeah, I mean, so I had the same, except I broadened it to the pass catchers across the board because I think it only gets stronger from a Cincinnati point of view when you start to factor in tight ends and running backs. Like they brought back Mike Gesicki on kind of quietly, right? All the offseason focus was on Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Trey Hendrickson, the other side of the ball, the kind of bigger names. But one of the quiet pieces of business they took care of was bringing back Mike Gesicki, who was a really good fit for this offense last year. They have Eric All, who's, another year removed from injury, and I think he's a talented number 2 tight end as well. And then the backfield, Chase Brown is a really good receiving running back. I think Taj Brooks, who they drafted this year, is a good receiving running back as well and could add some juice to that. So suddenly you've got, the star power is spectacular. I mean, Jamar Chase has an argument to be the best wide receiver in the NFL. T. Higgins has an argument to be the best number 2 wide receiver in the NFL. Even if you're relatively underwhelmed by, Princeton and Charlie Jones and Jermaine Burton, I think you more than offset that by the second you get into tight ends or running backs.
Yeah, I think that was fair adding Gesicki to it. I mean, that was kind of a missing piece for the Bengals over the last few years, and Gesicki filled that extremely well when those outside receivers are taken care of, having other options. And yeah, I think the Bengals have some depth. Overall pass catchers, I agree with Chase Brown catching the ball out of the backfield. Samaje Perine's back, was a fantastic third down back for a while here. So yeah, I've been calling it the receivers, but I'd be fine calling it all the pass catchers as well. That's number 5 for me. All right, number 6. I'm going Broncos cornerbacks. The Broncos corners. So there's some projection here because I'm relying on a rookie. Yeah. You got Pat Surtain coming off an outstanding season, and a huge part of Denver's defensive success was, what he's able to do. Jahdae Barron in the first round to compete with Riley Moss. So I love the potential of this Broncos cornerback group here.
Yeah, so I didn't have this one, but I do kind of agree with you. I think it absolutely could be. It is kind of funny, though, that you spent half the offseason effectively calling for Riley Moss's head. They need somebody to upgrade on Riley Moss. And now he's part of like the greatest cornerback room in the NFL.
He's a good 3. I don't love him as a 2. And no, but he's still all right. Like, I think that'll be a good competition. And then Barron, like, we love Barron coming out too. His flexibility, everything we raved about the Ravens, versatility. One of my weaknesses in player evaluation. I think Barron's ability to play inside, outside as well. Just overall good football skills. I think that'll do him well.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of the question is how they're going to deploy those guys. And exactly what Jahdae Barron is going to end up being. Because he's another one of these. I forget who had the tweet, but somebody at draft time was like, "Look, you overthought it with Kyle Hamilton. You overthought it with Brian Branch. Just don't overthink it with Jahdae Barron. He's not exactly a prototype of whatever it is you're looking for at any of these spots, but he's just damn good. Just take him, figure it out later." And it feels like that's what Denver did. But do you leave him as a sort of slot nickel hybrid type of weapon player? Do you let him play outside corner? Does he, how exactly that deployment is going to be, I think will be interesting. But either way, as a top 3, however they actually line up, Surtain, Jahdae Barron, assuming he's anything like we think he is, and then Riley Moss is a really good combination. Jaquan McMillan, I think, is a nice slot corner as well. Yep. Lower down the depth chart as a 4th guy. I think this could absolutely be one of the better cornerback groups in football.
Yeah, I wanted to add Jaquan McMillan in there, and that's part of the flexibility thing. McMillan's been a really nice find playing in the slot. So, if Barron could compete with him for slot snaps, he could compete with Moss for outside snaps. Either way, I think you're rolling pretty deep. I kind of like Chris Abrams' drain as well. I mean, if you're talking about a CB5, that's depth there, but also the star power at the top with Pat Surtain. So again, like kind of an underrated group, making a point here, putting them at 6, Broncos cornerbacks. But this is banking on Barron, I would say, locking up that number 2 spot and being as good as I thought. That sounded like a Brett Coleman tweet, by the way, that you were talking about.
He's definitely saying, don't overthink Brian Branch. I'm not sure if that's the exact one I remember, but yeah, he had something. He's definitely had a similar sentiment at some stage.
All right, number 7 for me, Vikings pass catchers. They should probably be higher. On this list. I made the point last year. I think they were the best trio, at least in the NFL. When you talk about Jordan Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and T.J. Hawkinson, still believe that's true. I think Jefferson. It's interesting when you look. When I'm ranking receiving groups, the Bucs have Mike Evans as their high end guy. And the Bengals have Jamar Chase as their high end guy. I think the Eagles might be on my list. Spoiler alert. They have A.J. Brown. The Vikings have Justin Jefferson. So I want to say, I think having the true number 1, not just in name, but the impact that they have, that's important. And then having a number 2 that is dependable. And I think the Vikings have that, right? With Addison being just a beautiful number 2 to complement Jefferson, whereas Jefferson's that guy who could take over a game, win at every level of the field. You don't necessarily have to scheme him open. But, man, Kevin O'Connell also does a nice job of scheming him and giving him opportunities. So, yeah, that top 3 is carrying the weight there with Jefferson, Addison, and T.J. Hawkinson for me.
Yeah, I think as long as you're kind of broadening it beyond wide receivers into pass catchers again, like the Bengals, I think I think it's good, a good shout. Hawkinson, really good receiving tight end. Obviously, he's dealt with injury and should be coming back sort of stronger than he's been. I think Aaron Jones as well is a really nice receiving running back. You know, part of his skill set is absolutely there as well. And then a kind of question mark or an X factor in this receiving core is what rookie Ty Felton is going to be. You know, they spent a 3rd round pick on him. He's big, he's fast. He has seemingly terrible ball skills, but does that matter? Like, can he just be the kind of deep threat or the kind of the dynamic, like fear threat for like Jalen Naylor was kind of supposed to be that, never really turned into that player, I think, for them. Maybe Ty Felton can be a better version of that, and it doesn't matter that much if he struggles at the catch point relative to the other receivers they've got. It should be a dynamic, destructive group.
But Naylor always impressed me too. I mean, he's kind of a part of this mix. They'd get him open in the red zone, and he made some plays like, for a wide receiver 3 where that the volume's going to go to 3 other targets a lot more than, other wide receiver 3s. You're not going to get a ton of opportunities. But I thought Naylor did make some plays. You're right. Felton speed, big playability could be a really nice compliment. I didn't love him as an all-around receiver, but if that's all he's asked to do is to it was more his play strength for me, reminded me of Tyquan Thornton just a little bit as far as dude's fast, but I'm not trusting him at the catch point all the time. But he, like any receiver, had some great catches, even in traffic, just didn't do it consistently. So I think there is opportunity there. And then they just invested in tight end too, Josh Oliver, not as a pass threat, more of a run blocking tight end. But I've always had a soft spot for Josh Oliver since scouting him at San Jose State. So one of my favorite tight end 2s around the league, and obviously one of Kwesi's as well, the way he's getting paid. So look, I think it's a little top heavy with Jefferson first, but Addison being one of the best number 2s, Hawkinson one of the best pass catching tight ends. They're carrying the weight for me in this one. But you mentioned Aaron Jones and some of the complementary pieces. It's a really good group in Minnesota.
They also
second time I've had the Vikings on this list, by the way. They've
also done the low risk roll of the dice. Let's see if Rondale Moore is the star that he was at Purdue as a freshman. The offensive version of Jason Verrett. Every year,
yes,
I'm kicking the tires on Rondale Moore to see if I can find that guy. And let's see. Probably won't, but who knows?
The trouble with the Rondale Moore dice roll is that you probably have to scheme. It's got to be scheme specific for him. It's not just like, hey, Jason Verrett, I hope you're cornerback 2 this year. It's like, man, I wonder if we could get Rondale Moore in space, and that takes some commitment that maybe teams aren't willing to invest. All right, my next group, number 8. Some controversy here, Sam. I put a poll out. This was weeks ago now. Wanted to see what the people thought. The poll was, who has the better defensive line? 2 options, Eagles or Giants. As of record time here, the people say 52% Eagles, 48% Giants. But number 8 for me on this list is the Giants defensive line. I've got them in the top 10. I'm living in the Dexter Lawrence hype that we love to create, which is valid. The trio of of edge rushers, Brian Burns, the addition of Abdul Carter, and then Kayvon Thibodeau. I mean, just that 4 right there is outstanding. I love Darius Alexander in the 4th. I don't think they have the same kind of depth as every other team that we've listed on here. For the most part, had some level of depth that I was raving about as well. I don't think the Giants have that. But, man, there's so much potential for this defensive line heading into this year.
Yeah, there is. But I think that potential word is why, teams or why some people would go in the other direction and say, actually the Eagles have more proven quality than the Giants do. I think the potential of that Giants defensive front is really, really good. But we loved Kayvon Thibodeau at draft time, not number 1 overall, but we thought he was probably the second best pass rusher in that draft. And he hasn't become an impact playmaker. So as much as Abdul Carter may be, an impact dynamic, difference maker right off the bat, maybe not. And if he isn't, suddenly the whole complexion of this defensive line changes. And it's still relying on Dexter Lawrence being one of the best players in the NFL, Brian Burns being good, and then they're still sort of struggling for those supporting cast members. But look, Lawrence is one of one. He's one of the top players in the NFL. There's nobody playing the nose tackle position the way he is. There's nobody that generates the kind of pressure or disruption that he can from that interior spot. He is the gap between him and the second best player, sort of quote unquote, at his position, right? Because nobody's playing nose tackle that much. And certainly nobody's playing it like him. Like the gap between him and the second best guy may be bigger than it is at any other position in the NFL. Brian Burns is really good. Then you get the question marks. Abdul Carter could be phenomenal based off how amazing he was really his first year playing as a full-time edge rusher. If he develops, like he's got the bend, he's got the acceleration, the burst. If he just develops further, adds a couple more moves to his pass rush arsenal, he could be phenomenal. Similarly, Darius Alexander was a guy a lot of people loved at draft time as well, and they got him as a relative steal. So if he's able to come in and be a significant difference maker right away, it's huge. And then Thibodeau being sort of dropped further down the depth chart, his impact or his value just gets higher relative to how much he's playing. So I think the potential is absolutely there for this group to be really good, but it is relying on several what ifs all stringing together in their direction.
Oh yeah. I mean, I might be a year early on this. I think Thibodeau, so Lawrence, everything that you said, I think Brian Burns, I still don't know if I would pay him close to $30 million per year, but he was more productive last year than maybe I anticipated. Still a very difficult threat off the edge with his speed, a little bit better against the run last year in particular. Kayvon Thibodeau, I think is he worth the number 7 overall pick? You could argue that, but I think he's fallen in as a pretty good number 2 edge rusher. And then Abdul Carter is absolutely the wild card. Not only young on the edge, but I thought it took him a few weeks last year, but after that it clicked and he was awesome. So there's some projection here. There's also, it's top heavy in that if you move Carter around, who is a former linebacker, by the way, and on third down, you're talking about Thibodeau and Burns off the edge, Dexter Lawrence in the middle, and wherever you want to put Abdul Carter, good luck. We're going to create mismatches with him. That's a beautiful front four, rushing the passer on third down. And I am a Darius Alexander fan. I think the biggest knock is the fact that he's 24, but I think you're talking about second round type of value that they got top of the third or fourth, top of the third. And I think he has a chance to make an impact right away. And he's got some multi-gap potential as well. The rest of it, pretty much rotational type of players. I don't know if the depth is there. I know the league really liked Roy Robertson Harris for a while. Rakeem Nunez-Roches has been a rotational player his whole career. I don't think the depth is there. They're not scaring anybody. But the first 4 or 5 on the depth chart, really good for the Giants. And what I'm saying is I would put their first 4 or 5 up against the Eagles' first 4 or 5. And I think with Milton Williams leaving, with Josh Sweat leaving, I love the replacements that the Eagles have as well. But you have to acknowledge, like, they've taken a hit. The Giants have gone the other way. So right now I'm putting the Giants above them as far as defensive line rankings go here.
You can't drag back the credit now. You're a well-known Maro Ajomo skeptic. It's well documented.
I love Ajomo. I don't think Ajomo is going to be as good as Milton Williams, though. But he was a steal in the 7th round a couple of years ago.
I mean, really, when you're comparing the Giants and the Eagles, it basically comes down to Abdul Carter, because I think the Giants have, if you look at sort of the best, if you rank them in order, right, on each depth chart, the Giants have the best player of either team. So Dexter Lawrence is better than anybody on the Eagles defensive front. I think you can argue that Brian Burns is better than the second best player on the Eagles defensive front as well. So the Giants have the best player and the best number 2 player of their front, of their defensive lines. Then the question becomes, what is Abdul Carter? Because if he's good, they have arguably the best 3. But if he's not, the Eagles might have the best 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and maybe even 7th best player on the defensive line.
That'd be a good one, because when I was tweeting about Dexter Lawrence a few weeks ago, Eagles and Giants fans are battling between a Jalen Carter, Dexter Lawrence, who's better discussion. I mean, if you were just ranking the best players on both teams, I would say Lawrence 1, Carter 2. Then you're talking probably Burns 3. Yeah. But the answer is they're playing different positions anyway. I could see Jalen Carter being, as we've said many times, the very best true defensive tackle, 3 technique, say. Lawrence, the best nose tackle. Fine. Split them however you want. They're both elite players.
But my point is, the Giants have the best player overall. They have the second best player on each team. But then the Eagles might be better from that point on at every respective position, unless Abdul Carter is really good. If Abdul Carter is really good, the Giants might have the best 1, 2, and 3 player, in which case it almost doesn't matter. Like, the Eagles could literally have the best at every subsequent position, and the Giants would still be better based off the top heaviness, the fact that those top 3 guys are so good. So honestly, it really comes down to how good Abdul Carter is as a rookie. Like, if he is special, if he is as good as a lot of people thought he was, if he's good enough, with that, the physical traits and what he's able to do even without developing, it's enough.
Yeah. So the other part about the Eagles here, they didn't make my top 10 on the defensive line. Losing Josh Sweat, losing Milton Williams, all they've done is opted into a few more unknowns. Ajomo played really well last year. We've talked a ton about Jalix Hunt and what he did down the stretch, but there's still need to see more from them. And I know you could say the same thing about Abdul Carter, but I'm banking on, look, there's been a lot of blue chip edge rushers who come into the league, get drafted in the top 5, and hit the ground running right away. It is one of the easier slam dunk projections in the NFL. So I'm banking on that when it comes to Carter. But yeah, at the end of the year, we might be talking about the Eagles. Like, absolutely, they're back. They should be on this list. Hunt is a star, and Ajomo's the next star, and Nolan Smith's taken another step forward, whatever it might be. So yeah, but the Eagles are a just miss for me as far as this list goes. I'm going with the Giants D-line. The Eagles did make the last 2, though. How about that? That's how good this roster is. Eagles pass catchers are number 9 for me. And similar to the other ones, the star in A.J. Brown, the high end's number 2 in Devontae Smith, and they still have Dallas Goedert. So all the trade rumors about Dallas Goedert being gone, and they would take a hit. That would take a hit. Like, the fact that they have that trio is huge. I think every team should be trying to get to 4 deep, but at least get to 3 deep of different ways to keep defenses off balance, and the Eagles have that once again. And then, of course, Saquon Barkley also coming out of the backfield, where he is a wheel route terror. You can catch the ball and jump backwards over you. You never know what Saquon's going to do catching the ball out of the backfield. So I got the Eagles pass catchers as an entire group here.
Yeah, I think they deserve to be there. Again, once you broaden it to Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, I think that gets them in. The wide receivers on their own are still a little bit top heavy for me. If you get an injury to either A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith, you immediately cease to like what they're bringing to the table. Obviously, the other one of those 2 guys is still really good, but then Jahan Dotson is now an every down starter, and you don't love that, or you're relying on a big jump forward from a Johnny Wilson or somebody like Aeneas Smith to come in. Like, it's just, there's not enough there that would be confident in. But Dallas Goedert's a really good tight end. Like, he's a dynamic receiving tight end. He's a dangerous player. He's got size, speed, route running ability. And then Saquon Barkley is, the most physically gifted running back in the NFL, capable of doing amazing things in the pass game as well, and as a home run hitter anytime the ball is in his hands. So yeah, as a collective pass catching group, this unit probably deserves to be in there.
Yeah, and it goes back to the ways to win. When we're breaking down games every single week, every single game, as we preview them every Thursday, I always talk about, I want teams that have different ways to win. And when we show up on a Monday morning and there are games where the Eagles ran the ball like crazy and Jalen Hurts doesn't have a great stat line from a pass perspective, and A.J. Brown doesn't have a great stat line from a receiving perspective, and then there's other games where it's like A.J. Brown catches 10, Devontae Smith catches 8, and that's how the Eagles won. I don't know if it's ever going to properly show up in the production just how good A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are, because they have the run game, Hurts running ability, the offensive line. They can win with defense. They can do it all. So, but that's part of what makes them great. And I really do think that the number 1 receiver, and the reason why I have the Bengals with Jamar Chase and the Vikings with Justin Jefferson and the Eagles with A.J. Brown, is because I think those guys are all absolute game changers, and they also happen to have this really nice wide receiver 2 complement. So that's why they're all in my top 10 here. All right, and then the Eagles again, O-line. Even with turnover, right? I mean, it's like the best tackle duo of the NFL, Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson. Cam Jurgens has shown, I think, that he could step in and play reasonably at center. He's not Jason Kelsey, but he could step in and play. They did a nice job with so Landon Dickerson at guard, his ability to play through injury as well and play center in a pinch. Every year, though, it seems like they come in with, all right, we got one more starter to rotate, but that's usually a good proxy for me, Sam, right? Like when we're ranking offensive lines every year, there's usually one line where I feel good about all 5. This year, there's not one anymore. But if you have 4 out of 5 starters in a good spot, and you're like, hey, we got to fill this one spot. Last year was Mekhi Becton at right guard. He stepped in and he was great. This year, it's right guard for the Eagles. That's a good spot to be heading into the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's effectively where it was a year ago. Like, Mekhi Becton was not expected to be the starting right guard for this team when they signed him. That's where he ended up. That's where they decided to put him, and he ended up having a really good season at that position. But, you go back before they signed him, or even when they signed him, we were probably looking at this saying effectively the same thing. 4 out of 5 spots. Cam Jurgens, how he's exactly going to replace Jason Kelce was something of an unknown, but people felt relatively good about it because of what they'd seen from him before, the fact that they drafted him kind of with that succession plan in mind. But right guard was a question mark. But 4 out of 5 spots being at least good, if not even better, and Jeff Stoutland as offensive line coach, you're like, let's give them the benefit of the doubt that the 5th spot will either be okay or that they're going to be able to hide one spot when it's a guard. Same spot now. Like, worst case scenario, right guard is a problem that you can hide, reasonably easily within individual games without doing too much crazy to sort of hamstring the rest of the offense. Best case scenario is, Kenyon Green or somebody else from the depth chart that we're not even thinking about right now is Jeff Stoutland's special project this year, and they do the next Mekhi Becton season, and right guard is good as well, and it's 5 spots that are good. And the Eagles have the best offensive line in the NFL again, and it remains, a massive strength of this team.
The other part of this, and again, this isn't why they're ranked there for me, it's the fact that I feel good about 4 out of 5 starters. And look, the Lions would be up here if Frank Ragnow didn't retire. I'd feel good about the Lions in 4 out of 5 spots. And then when they had Zeitler last year, it's like, well, clearly, I mean, they'd be number 1 probably as far as position units for me going into the year if they still had Zeitler and Ragnow. But now you lose both of those guys and you have 2 questions. So having 3 solidified instead of 4 is a big deal on the O-line. The other aspect for the Eagles, though, drafted 3 intriguing developmental tackles. I mean, this isn't putting them over the top, but when you talk about, hey, Lane Johnson's getting a little bit older, you look like you're probably going to have Mailata as the left tackle for the future. They've thrown 3 darts at tackle. 7th rounder Miles Hinton. And if you go back, you watch the Eagles draft video, there's people in the draft room saying, like, this guy has all the tools. Perfect developmental tackle. So Miles Hinton from Michigan, Holland Pierce from Rutgers, who's just a monster, and then Cameron Williams from Texas, who just hasn't played a ton of football but has all the traits. I'm intrigued by that. Like, long term, I'm looking at that. If they just find one future right tackle out of that trio, you're talking about this, continuing development on the Eagles offensive line. And it's organizational, man. Like, they have had, when we've been ranking offensive lines for over a decade now, there's not a season, I don't think, that they have ranked outside the top 5 heading into the year. And I would say that there's probably 2 or 3 seasons where they performed below a top 10 offensive line, right? Like one or 2 of the Carson Wentz years where they've had injuries. But for the most part, the Eagles, for most of Howie Roseman's time there, have had one of the best offensive lines, and they've done a great job reloading.
There are some fascinating names like on this depth chart when you go down further. Like you said, the guys they drafted this year. They've also got Darian Kennard there, who is sort of fascinating. Yep. Like, if Darian Kennard ended up being a Jeff Stoutland reclamation project who played at right guard all season and was good, that wouldn't shock me in the slightest. Same thing's true with Matt Pryor, who's there as well on the depth chart. Kendall Lamb is on the depth chart. He's had, plenty of seasons as a starter and been solid in some of them. Like, there are an awful lot of interesting players here. And look, it's easy to do this, and sometimes this is like a self-perpetuating myth, but like, Jeff Stoutland has enough credit in the bank at this point that I think you can give him the credit and the benefit of the doubt for that. It is intriguing suddenly when you bring any offensive lineman who's got some interesting tools to work with, and you say, now you're going to go work with Jeff Stoutland and you're going to have a training camp with him teaching you some stuff. And it just makes those players inherently more interesting than they would be if they went to some random other team with a nobody offensive line coach who has no track record of, modeling any lump of clay into a proven quality NFL player. Jeff Stoutland makes half a dozen guys on the current depth chart like kind of interesting players to me.
Not every team has that type of advantage, but when you have the advantage of, hey, like our offensive line coach is pretty good at developing players, it makes the team building effort easier. And it really is. Like you can't just really give moldable clay to every offensive line coach and have them make something out of it. When you do have that, though, it's like, all right, such a weapon to be able to steal starters here and there. And in the case of, Jordan Mailata, steal, potential all-pro, elite left tackle. So Eagles offensive line, they're number 10 for me. As always, move the rankings however you want. That's what you did, right? You just listed 10 groups. Yeah. So who we agreed on at least 7 of those, I think. When you look at if we say I said receivers, you said pass catchers, or vice versa, whatever. Who else did you have in your top 10 here?
Yeah, so there's 3 that I had that you did not. One of them I think is the newly rebuilt Minnesota Vikings offensive line. I think that has the potential to be one of the best lines in the NFL now. They already had one of the best tackle bookends in football with Christian Darrisaw, who's an elite level left tackle, Brian O'Neill, who's an elite level right tackle, and they remade the entire interior this offseason. And they remade it with Ryan Kelly, a center who's had, periods of play where he's been one of the best centers in the NFL. Will Fry is at right guard, who's dealing with a much smaller sample size, but the sample size is very good. PFF grade of like 87 last year. And then, a high-end rookie in Donovan Jackson, who played well at both guard and tackle in college and, will now just be tasked with being the sort of the 5th player on that offensive line. We said before, if you feel good about 4 out of your 5 spots in the offensive line, you have a really good offensive line. I kind of feel pretty good about all 5 of these spots.
Yeah, this one's close. I think there's still. I mean, I love the process for how they went through here. I mean, the money for Will Fries, I think, was a lot for a guy who I had an okay season started, and then the 5 games that you mentioned. So there's still some risk there. I think there's just a little bit more risk attached to the players on the interior. Ryan Kelly, injury-wise, getting older. Yeah. Donovan Jackson, I think he was a pretty good prospect, maybe not great. So I'd say I feel good about 3.5 starters here for Minnesota rather than 4. So they're close for me, but I want to see how this plays out. And by the end of the year, we could be saying, oh yeah, Kwesi's a genius, man. He solved both guard spots between Donovan Jackson and Will Fries, and this is the best center play they've had in a long time. It easily could go in a favorable way here for Minnesota. And look, that's 3 different units we've mentioned for Minnesota.
Yeah.
3 different units we've mentioned for the Eagles. I said, hey, their defensive line, I'm not going to list them, but they're at least part of this conversation again, because that's how they build, showing some of the depth of both of those teams.
No, I agreed. I mean, Minnesota, they were a good team a year ago. Like they have a lot of talent and they fixed some of their weakest links. If JJ McCarthy is anything other than terrible, this should be a good football team this year.
Who else did you have on your list that I didn't have?
So when I got to the point where I was like, okay, now I need to come up with creative ways of forming a unit, because I don't love, other offensive lines. I don't love any other defensive lines, secondaries, blah, blah, blah. I think the Ravens backfield, right? Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson effectively combined is still one of the best units in the NFL. It was fantasy football dream, this time a year ago. What would happen if you paired Derrick Henry with a guy like Lamar Jackson? We saw it, and it was every bit as spectacular as you thought it might be, if you were just creating these things in a fantasy draft. It's still there. Derrick Henry's, another year old. Who cares? He's still phenomenal. It's the best backfield, in my opinion, in the NFL.
And even Justice Hill did a really nice job when he had opportunities as well, both as a pass catcher and running the ball. So, yeah, I think that's good. I mentioned to you off air, let's get creative with this. I like that. Backfield of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Good luck. And what you saw was Lamar Jackson's best statistical season and Henry's best as well. And so, yeah, I think it's a fair call there.
By the way, interesting stat that I thought of or came across, depending on how you want to view it. How many years has Derrick Henry been in the NFL now? We on year 10 or whatever?
2016. This will be year 10 for
Yeah.
him.
So we've got whatever it is, 9 seasons worth of NFL action, 11,000 career yards or whatever he's at. He still hasn't eclipsed the yardage he put up in high school.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. What a crazy career, man. He really is a unicorn. The recruiting people love telling the story. And a lot of them, making fun of themselves because people said he should have played linebacker coming out.
Right.
And it was either recruiting people or other colleges or whatever it was. And I empathize with that, right? Because you never know when you're going to find the unicorn. And he's a unicorn in a couple different ways because he's 250 pounds with crazy speed and has shown zero decline.
Yes.
And has shown incredible durability, very few injuries. But like when you're playing the odds historically, it's like, well, the 250 pound back, you don't find those guys in the NFL. You usually do have to convert them to different positions. If they do have a good 5 or 6 year run, well, that's going to end at some point. You never give that guy a second or third contract. Like he's bucked every single trend that big data, so to speak, or every single trend. He's bucked it all. So I don't blame people for that. He's incredible.
No, and the thing is, from a process standpoint, I think the league handled it correctly. I mean, he won a Heisman Trophy in college, and they still didn't trust him enough to have him drafted in the first round. Like he was still a second round draft pick because the league looked at him and said, "Okay, yeah, that was spectacular, but that was Alabama. It's different in the NFL. You're 6'3", 250, but you don't look, super twitchy. You're probably not going to be the unicorn." And it turns out he was, right? Like I think the process was. The instinct was correct. He's probably not a unicorn because almost nobody is. That's why they're unicorns. And yet Derrick Henry turns out he actually is that guy. And then I think the sort of the next referendum on that was when the Ravens gave him the kind of cash, right? And said, sure, he's 30 years old effectively, but he's Derrick Henry. Like, I think at this point he's proven that he is the unicorn. We can still bring him in for decent money and let's pair him with Lamar Jackson. Like, I think you had to earn that with proven NFL production and ability and proven NFL sort of exceptionalism rather than just assuming he has it coming out of college.
I know Leonard Fournette came after Derrick Henry, but when you have the big backs who look like, just dominant in college, people think, well, Ron Dane, if you go back to 98, 99, Ron Dane dominated and then looked slow and plodding in the NFL. You fast forward to a guy like Fournette. Like Fournette looked like the next big thing, kind of looked slow and plodding in the NFL relative to that. Good straight line speed, but that was it. Henry bucked that trend. The other part about Henry, where he actually started his career kind of slow, and then it was like late 2018. He's got that Thursday night game against Jacksonville. It was like something clicked, man. It went from you're just this big dude to like you're going to be this big dude who plays fast and just runs people over. And I feel like it's been all incredible since that late 2018 game against the Jags for Henry. But he's also incredibly consistent too, where he starts the season slow for a few weeks. I mean, there's just so much to Henry's career that is unique to Derrick Henry relative to other running backs. So, yeah, I like that you shouted out the Ravens backfield there.
And then, so here's my sort of cheat or like my very specific criteria for allowing this to be a unit. Because you could just make the case Patrick Mahomes plus anybody is the best backfield in the NFL, right? If you believe Mahomes is still the best quarterback. But I think the quarterback element of the backfield has to feature as a significant part in the run game, right?
Runner, yeah.
Well, Lamar Jackson as a backfield weapon. Oh, Patrick Ricard as well, by the way. We didn't even mention him. Right. But Lamar Jackson being like a dynamic part of that run game is why it works as a backfield. So that's why the other backfield that I went with is the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen and James Cook and Ray Davis as the backup there. Like the Bills as a running threat backfield is as good as it gets as well.
No, I think that's fair. When we're talking backfield, we're not saying, can the quarterback drop back to pass? We're talking about as run threats. And even though Allen's not used a ton in the design running game the same way Lamar Jackson is, you're talking about the whole he can't, he does use, they do use him on QB sweeps and keepers and the whole thing. Like, it's not like he doesn't do that. Just not as much as some others. So yeah, I like that one. But yeah, good luck. Third and short, QB sneak package and the whole deal. I guess we should put the Eagles backfield up there as well then.
Yeah. With
Saquon, A.J. Dillon, and Jalen Hurts. So the Eagles are back on this list.
Yep. No, that makes
sense.
So
we've mentioned the Ravens a couple times, secondary and backfield. We've mentioned the Eagles a bunch. Now 4 times. 4 different units we've talked with the Eagles. And Vikings 3 different times. Pretty good. That's why we're ranking some of those teams as the best in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy to see why teams are favorites or expected to have really high win totals projected, etc. Like, there are some teams that have a handful of very good units, and it's going to take something, injuries or the unit that isn't ranked as one of the best, to be utterly catastrophic for these teams not to be good.
All right, I'll give you a little bit of a teaser, some insight into some stuff I work on the side as I'm helping NFL teams. Some unit rankings that the data has just pushed to near the top for various reasons that I don't maybe don't trust it enough to bring it to the table in my top 10, but just to keep an eye on. So the Houston Texans receivers are really high in some of my modeling and data efforts. And this is because Nico Collins, you've made the astute point. If you look at his efficiency and the way he's played for the last 2 years, like top 5 wide receiver, he's in that conversation. I don't necessarily put him there yet with A.J. Brown and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, but he's played to that level. So you have Nico Collins. All my stuff loves Jaden Higgins. You add Jaden. You have Higgins and Knoll coming in. I got to take Tank Dell out of the mix here, but they'd still be pretty high. And then Christian Kirk is still there and pretty good. So Texans receivers are one to just kind of keep an eye on in this group here. The other one, good.
That makes sense, right? You can talk yourself into the optimistic outlook of that group easily.
Oh, especially if it's just like, I think paying Kirk wide receiver 1 money or like 1.5 money a couple years ago felt excessive.
Yeah.
But if he's your 3, like if one of those rookies becomes the 2 to Nico Collins and Kirk is your 3, then yeah, that's a good group. That's a really good group for Houston. The other one that popped for me in the data, the Arizona Cardinals defensive tackles are really high. And that's in part because Calais Campbell's still awesome and he's on their team. But also adding Dalvin Tomlinson and drafting Walter Nolan, who I really liked coming out as well. So they go from they're throwing backup D lines out there to all of it, especially a defensive tackle. No offense to Roy Lopez and company, but those are all great rotational players, right? Those guys would all be 4th and 5th defensive tackles on most good defensive lines. But Calais Campbell can still play at almost our age. Dalvin Tomlinson, Walter Nolan, the Cardinals defensive tackle group has a chance to be one of the best in the NFL, according to some numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. Like, we were lamenting the starters on this defensive line last year, but they've literally replaced the entire starting unit effectively. Like, the trio, if you look at this defense of, Darius Robinson, last year's first-round pick, and Bilal Nichols and Justin Jones, those guys are all second string now behind Walter Nolan and Dalvin Tomlinson and Calais Campbell, assuming they sort of stuck to this rigid first platoon, second platoon kind of structure. I'm sure there'll be a lot more chopping and changing than that. But, effectively, they have done the thing that we always ask these teams to do, is take a guy who's a useful player and drop him one down the depth chart. And suddenly his value is so much higher because he doesn't have to do, like, the responsibility of that role is not as great. They've done that with the defensive tackles in particular, but that defensive front generally, and it should make a huge impact.
The one last unit I want to mention that the data is strong on, and this shouldn't surprise you, but it's another, like, let's give it one more year, and we're almost certainly talking about them. But the Rams defensive line, I think it was last show, we were just raving about Jared Verse. So you've got the Verse star power. You have it's just incredible that they've done this too over the last 2 years, that they've essentially added all of this youth over the last 2 years. Jared Verse and Byron Young on the edge, Kobe Turner and Braden Fisk at defensive tackle. Tyler Davis, could be a good defensive tackle rotation guy, but Poona Ford too. Another one of those, like I would sign him every year in free agent type of guys, quietly productive, super valuable player relative to what he gets paid. So you add Poona Ford to the mix. And then the drafting of Josiah Stewart. And if Josiah Stewart as just a pass rush specialist, edge 3, we could easily be talking about this group next year in this best unit group. And all of the significant players will be in the first 3 years of their NFL career. That is incredible for what the Rams have built from a youth perspective on this defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I think Byron Young is a useful player as well, for sort of how young he is in terms of playing experience, both in college and the NFL. Like that is a talented group.
So that's it as far as just a couple I wanted to highlight. Browns defensive line too. That's going to be top heavy with Myles Garrett, but I think if Mason Graham is actually a blue chip prospect, a player, and a couple guys developed over there the last couple of years, McGuire and everything. I mean, they got some players there too. I think the Browns could be a sneaky good defensive line this year. Even beyond Myles Garrett.
I think any team, there's not any team. There's quite a few teams who added a sort of potential blue chip star in this draft who, if that guy is for real, they could immediately have one of those best units in the NFL. And that specific, like the Jags wide receiver room suddenly gets fascinating if Travis Hunter is like a talented playmaker the way he looked like he was in college. And obviously, Brian Thomas Jr. continues his ascent, but like he looks like he could be a superstar. If Travis Hunter's able to feast on cornerback 2s, they've got De'Ami Brown as a deep threat. They've got Parker Washington. Like that suddenly starts to look like an absolutely terrifying wide receiver room.
That's a great shout there. And the one more producer, Will, highlights, when we were doing our best player list, we were doing our best player by position, the 49ers had the most players discussed. We were talking McCaffrey at running back, Fred Warner at linebacker, Nick Bosa. I mean, all across the board. Kittle at tight end, right? Trent Williams at tackle. The Niners are nowhere to be found as far as best units. I think you could probably construct an argument that offensive line, if Williams is healthy, that they're in the discussion among the best offensive lines, but not like the best unit in football. But that's an interesting one, isn't it? Like, I don't think there's anyone where you'd say they've got one of the best, because the defensive line's been depleted. Fred Warner lost his running mate at linebacker. The offensive line's always been kind of top heavy with Trent Williams, and they found solid otherwise. Maybe McCaffrey, maybe the running back room is there if McCaffrey's healthy.
I thought about including them in that pass catchers umbrella, the way we've done with a couple of other teams. I think if you start to look at the composite of Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings and George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey and Ricky Pearsall, if you want to throw him in there as well, I think you can make the argument that that's one of the best group of pass catchers in the NFL. But it is interesting that like all their star power is sort of evenly distributed amongst the certainly the offense and then a couple of players on defense.
I like it. This is fun discussion here. It's good July stuff. We're weeks away. I call it Romeo Doubs month coming up here. Romeo Doubs, month of August, the greatest August receiver we've ever seen. We're closing in on training camp. We're going to be talking training camp battles. We're going to be talking about all the news and everything that's going on around the NFL. And then we'll be in our studio very soon. We're in the middle of putting it all together, getting ready for late July, just a couple weeks away from really kicking off the 2025 season, previewing every team and getting ready for the preseason. It's going to be here in just weeks, Sam.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, that's it for us today. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again on Monday with more.